On a cold November night in 1974, the quiet town of Amityville, New York, was shaken to its core. Inside a large Dutch colonial home on 112 Ocean Avenue, a crime unfolded that would stain the house forever. Around 3:15 a.m., a 23-year-old man named Ronald DeFeo Jr. rose from his bed, armed with a high-powered rifle. Methodically, he walked from room to room, murdering his entire family as they slept. His parents, Ronald Sr. and Louise, his two brothers, and his two sisters were all gunned down in their beds. None of them stirred. None of them fought back, as if some sinister hand had pressed them down into their mattresses, holding them still while death arrived. To this day, that detail haunts investigators. How could 6 people be shot in their own home with such a loud weapon and not a single neighbor hear a scream? How did no one run? No one try to escape? It was as though the entire house had been muffled by something unseen, as though some darkness had already claimed it before the first shot was fired. The brutal slaying of the DeFeo family would have been enough to mark the house forever. But this was only the beginning. In the years that followed, the house on Ocean Avenue would become one of the most infamous haunted locations in American history. It would inspire books, documentaries, and a blockbuster horror film franchise. But beneath the sensationalism lies a chilling question. Did something evil already live in that house before the murders? Or did the violence awaken it? Before we uncover more, take a moment to tell me in the comments where in the world you're rewatching from tonight. I'd love to see how far these haunted stories travel. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more chilling horror history for sleep, always paired with soothing rain sounds to keep you company through the night. The tragedy of the DeFeo family shocked Long Island, but soon the story would grow even darker, because just a year after the murders, a new family would move into 112 Ocean Avenue. Their names were George and Kathy Lutz, and what they claimed to endure inside that house would become one of the most terrifying hauntings ever recorded. But before the Lutzes stepped across the threshold, the house itself had already begun to develop a reputation. Neighbors whispered that it felt cursed. Some refused to walk near it after dark. Even Ronald DeFeo Jr. himself, during interviews, hinted at forces beyond his control, claiming he heard voices urging him to kill. Was this the madness of a murderer, or a glimpse into the true evil of Amityville? When George and Kathy purchased the home in December 1975, they saw only its beauty. The Dutch colonial stood tall and elegant, with its distinctive quarter-moon windows staring out like watchful eyes. It was spacious, perfect for their growing family, and remarkably affordable, because of its grisly history. They knew of the murders, of course, but they didn't believe in curses, and they were eager to make the house their home. Yet, as they crossed the threshold, the neighbors who had once whispered behind closed doors wondered silently. Were the Lutzes walking into a dream, or into a nightmare waiting to be reborn? And then, on their very first night inside the house, the nightmare began. George and Kathy Lutz moved into 112 Ocean Avenue with their 3 children on December 19, 1975. At first, the house seemed warm, inviting, and full of promise. They decorated for the holidays, settling into what they thought would be a fresh start. But almost immediately, subtle oddities began to disturb them. George, who had always been a healthy, even-tempered man, found himself changing. He grew irritable, withdrawn, obsessed with the fireplace. Night after night, he would sit before the flames, staring into them for hours, as though hypnotized. Worse, he began waking at precisely 3:15 a.m. every night, the exact time when the DeFeo murders had taken place. He didn't know why, but something pulled him awake, as if the house itself wanted him conscious at that unholy hour. Kathy, meanwhile, began to have violent nightmares. She dreamed of the murders, seeing Ronald DeFeo Jr. pulling the trigger, the screams of his family echoing in her mind. At times, she claimed to see the actual crime replay before her eyes as she lay in bed. The children, too, began to complain of strange occurrences, doors slamming on their own, icy drafts that had no source, and the constant feeling of being watched. One of the most unsettling moments came when their daughter, Missy, introduced the family to her new friend. She called it Jody, describing it as a pig-like creature with glowing red eyes. George and Kathy thought it was just a child's imagination, until George himself looked out of an upstairs window one night and saw 2 fiery red eyes staring back at him from the darkness. He rushed outside, but there was nothing there. Nothing but tracks in the snow, larger than any pig should leave, leading nowhere. As the days passed, the phenomena escalated. Rooms filled with the stench of decay, then cleared just as suddenly. Swarms of flies appeared in the dead of winter, thick and buzzing, only to vanish moments later. Crucifixes hung on walls twisted upside down. Even the family priest who came to bless the home fled in terror after hearing a guttural voice demand, "Get out!" Still, the Lutzes tried to endure. They told themselves it was stress, that the weight of the house's past was seeping into their imaginations. But it grew harder to dismiss when Kathy felt unseen hands grab her, holding her down in bed. She awoke one morning to find herself covered in strange red welts. George claimed to see her face briefly transform, aging rapidly before his eyes, only to snap back to normal seconds later. The children began to speak of figures standing in their rooms at night, doors wrenched off their hinges, windows slammed with unnatural force, and always, that hour of 3:15 returned, pulling George from his sleep, dragging him to wander the house while whispers filled his ears. Neighbors reported seeing the family inside the house, but not in any way that seemed normal. One described seeing Kathy through a window, staring blankly at the wall for hours. Another swore she saw shadowy figures moving behind the curtains, even when the family wasn't home. The house seemed alive, its energy bleeding out into the surrounding streets. By the third week, the family was barely holding together. George and Kathy began to fight constantly. They grew pale, thin, their energy drained as though something was feeding on them. The children were plagued by night terrors, screaming until their throats went raw. And through it all, the presence of Jody, the red-eyed beast, seemed to loom larger and darker, its unseen weight pressing down on the family. On the 28th day, everything broke. The Lutzes would later describe the house descending into chaos, doors slamming, walls shaking, furniture sliding across the floor. George claimed to see a dark figure rising from the basement, its shape shifting, inhuman. Kathy cried out as invisible hands clawed at her, throwing her across the room. And in the children's bedrooms, something banged on the walls, as though trying to break through from the other side. Terrified beyond measure, the Lutz family grabbed what they could and fled the house in the middle of the night. They never returned. The haunting had lasted less than a month, 28 days that would echo forever as the Amityville Horror. But the story did not end there. Paranormal investigators soon descended on the house, determined to prove whether the Lutzes had experienced a true haunting or spun an elaborate hoax. Among them were two names that still carry weight in the world of the paranormal: Ed and Lorraine Warren. And what they claimed to encounter inside 112 Ocean Avenue may have been even darker than what the Lutz family endured. When the Lutz family fled 112 Ocean Avenue, they left everything behind: clothes, food, even toys still scattered across the floor. It was as though the house itself had expelled them. The story quickly caught fire in newspapers, television interviews, and across the paranormal community. But while some dismissed the tale as hysteria or fabrication, others were determined to uncover the truth. Among the most prominent were Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famed paranormal investigators. By the time they arrived in Amityville in 1976, they were already well known for their work on haunted houses, demonic possessions, and other infamous cases. Lorraine, a self-described clairvoyant, and Ed, a demonologist, entered the home with a small team of experts and reporters. From the very first moment, Lorraine described a crushing sense of dread. She claimed she could feel a demonic presence, something dark and inhuman lurking in the walls. As the team moved through the house, they conducted a seance in the living room. Lorraine went into a trance-like state, later recalling that she saw visions of the murdered DeFeo family and sensed an overwhelming evil spirit dominating the house. The team also brought along a photographer who set up cameras with infrared film to capture anything unseen by the human eye. One particular photograph has since become legendary: a small boy peeking out from a bedroom doorway, his eyes glowing white. The problem was, no children were in the house that night. To this day, believers insist the figure is one of the DeFeo children, still trapped within the home. Skeptics argue it was a simple trick of light, or even a human crew member mistakenly captured. But when the photo was published, it only deepened the house's terrifying reputation. Ed Warren later described the Amityville house as the most evil place I've ever investigated. He believed that the murders, coupled with occult practices in the area, had opened a doorway for demonic forces to manifest. According to the Warrens, the Lutzes weren't exaggerating. If anything, they had downplayed the danger they were in. But not everyone agreed. Almost immediately, accusations of fraud began to swirl. Some pointed to inconsistencies in George and Kathy Lutz's accounts, suggesting they had fabricated the haunting to make money through book and film deals. A local attorney even claimed that he, along with the Lutzes, had concocted the story one night over drinks. The Lutzes vehemently denied this, insisting every word was true, but the debate only fueled public fascination. Meanwhile, the house itself remained a dark curiosity. Paranormal groups returned again and again, each reporting strange sensations. Cold spots, sudden nausea, feelings of being watched. Neighbors, too, continued to speak of odd happenings. Lights flickering in the empty home, shadows moving past windows long after the Lutzes had gone. The Warrens stood firm in their conclusions. Lorraine, until her death, maintained that something deeply sinister lingered in Amityville, something that could never be explained away by hoaxes or hysteria. "There is such a thing as evil," she once said, "and it lived there." And yet, skeptics countered with logic, psychological stress, financial motivations, or simply the power of suggestion. After all, how much of the terror at Amityville came from the house itself? And how much came from the human mind filling in the shadows? But perhaps the most chilling truth is this: even if one doesn't believe the Lutzes, or the Warrens, or the infamous photo of the ghost boy, the murders that started it all remain very real. 6 people lost their lives inside that house, 6 innocent souls gunned down in their sleep. And whether or not something supernatural played a role, the blood of that crime forever stained 112 Ocean Avenue. The story of Amityville became more than just a haunting. It became a battleground between belief and skepticism, faith and doubt, horror and entertainment. Books, documentaries, and movies would retell the Lutzes' 28 Days of Terror, each adding new layers to the legend. But behind the Hollywood lights, one question continues to linger like a shadow in a darkened room. Was Amityville truly cursed? Or was it the greatest ghost story ever told? By the late 1970s, Amityville had already become a phenomenon. Jay Anson's book, The Amityville Horror, shot to the top of bestseller lists, captivating readers with its chilling retelling of the Lutz family's ordeal. Soon after, Hollywood transformed the story into films, beginning with the 1979 classic, which etched the eerie Dutch colonial house, those quarter-moon windows glaring like demonic eyes, into the cultural imagination. But unlike most horror movies, Amityville's terror wasn't confined to the screen. Every retelling, every interview, every photograph seemed to blur the line between fiction and reality. People wanted to believe. After all, the murders were indisputable. The Lutz's flight was undeniable. Something happened in that house. But what exactly? No one could ever agree upon. Through the decades, the story only grew. Sequels, spin-offs, remakes, and documentaries kept Amityville alive. Paranormal investigators continued to flock to the address, reporters kept digging into the case, and skeptics never stopped pointing out contradictions. The house itself even changed. New owners renovated it, and the infamous quarter-moon windows were altered, as if to strip the building of its sinister face. Yet despite the changes, whispers of the haunting never left. In 2005, the tale resurfaced with a new Hollywood adaptation, once again terrifying audiences. And when James Wan's The Conjuring 2 briefly touched on the Warrens' work in Amityville, it reintroduced the case to a whole new generation. To this day, the very name Amityville conjures dread, instantly recognized as shorthand for haunted houses and cursed homes. But what about the people who lived there after the Lutzes? Interestingly, several later families reported no unusual activity at all. For them, the house was simply a house, and life went on quietly. Did the evil fade away? Did the spirits finally rest? Or was it never real to begin with? Still, many cannot shake the feeling that Amityville remains tainted ground. Even skeptics admit that stories of sudden accidents, eerie sensations, and strange misfortunes continue to surround those who become too involved with the legend. And then there's the undeniable gravity of the original crime, Ronald DeFeo Jr. Cold-blooded slaughter of his parents and siblings. Evil was born in that house, whether of supernatural origin or human cruelty. Perhaps that is why the story has never died. Because even if you strip away the ghosts, the demons, the cursed photographs, the Warrens, and the books, you are left with a chilling truth. The house at 1-12 Ocean Avenue was a place of death. And sometimes, death leaves behind echoes that no one can silence. So tonight, as the rain falls outside your window and shadows lengthen across your room, remember the Amityville Horror. Was it a hoax, a haunting, or a dark reminder that some homes are destined to carry their tragedies forever? And I'd leave you with this. If you were handed the keys to that house tomorrow, would you step inside or would you run?